Well, hello, my friends. Thank you for joining me yet again for another topic for this week. This week, I want to explore and share with you some ideas that maybe help you be able to grow in curiosity. Now, as young kids, we are usually more geared towards being curious. We are more open to ideas and concepts when we are younger, and for good reasons. If we are more open to that, it helps us to be able to grow as individuals and then to create, ideas and concepts of our own as we get older through life. And so a lot of times we use different things that are introduced in our life when we're younger as a way to maybe either because we do it this way now because of this, or we don't do this because of this. So we have experiences in our life and we kind of use them one way or the other, depending on our relationship we create with our past and our relationship we've decided to create with ourselves right now. And all of that, I really believe, stems from deciding to become curious about your life, about your thoughts, about your beliefs, about your perceptions, and about your relationships. So the more curious we get to become, really can really help us ground ourselves so that we can actually create stronger connections in our lives. I believe the more curious I get, the more I actually can have more compassion towards others. I can have more empathy towards other people and what they're going through. And it makes me connect with them on a deeper level and not having to believe them necessarily, or adhere to their beliefs, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I don't have to believe the way they believe, but I can still connect with them in a really deep way because I allow and open up to it and I get curious about it instead of closing it off, that there can't be another way, that there only can be one way. So as kids, right, how do we start to create that in our lives for now, so that as we are creating connections in our world and we're trying to connect dots and we're trying to deepen or maybe understand ourselves better, understand other people better, how do we get curious instead of deciding that our way is the only way to see things, but yet at the same time hold our ground and believe what we believe? I think that is kind of the perplexity of the whole idea of becoming curious. But what I have found for myself as I've become more curious with other people, where they're at in life, been willing to open up to different ideas and concepts, is that me having space for other people's beliefs doesn't have to diminish mine. See, I think what happens is when we have more of a closed off belief, we think that if I see possibilities or agreement in what they're saying, then that means that I don't believe a certain way. So then we kind of take it, our ego kind of takes attached to that, thinking that something must be wrong with us. So one of the biggest things that I find to help us to explore more curiosity is how we can use ego with us and not against us. And knowing that ego is in place to help us build confidence, which is a good thing, but understanding that ego also attaches our thoughts and our emotions together and kind of merges them sometimes to make it think that that is who we are because of what we do, not just because this is what we believe and we're just being us, right? So that difference and trying to kind of disconnect it enough so that we can explore and get curious and not kind of grab it and think that this is the only way or it has to be done this way. And anyways, for me, what I have found is that the more I've opened up to curiosity in my life, just the more I've connected deeper with others and with myself. And then I start to actually explore the world and see things and not take offense to things as much. That's a huge one. The more curious I got, the more less offended I could be. You can not offend me as much. Don't get me wrong. I have feelings. I have sensitivity. People can still say hurtful things, but I don't take it to heart as deeply as I used to when I was more on a sense of trying to prove that my thoughts and my way of perceiving the world was right and other people's way was wrong. And that did not serve me very well. What serves me the best is when I open up to curiosity and I can see other people's points of view. So, right, getting that spot where we were curious as kids, we went out there, explored the world. How do we do that now as adults? Because now we have preconceived notions, right? We have concepts, we have thoughts, we have ideas of what we see being the betterment for society and being the worst for society. So we have these ideas that are kind of scrambling in our heads. And what I find interesting, what I find helpful for me is when I start to poke holes in my thoughts. When I start to give space for that, why do I see it this way? How can I find the pattern in which I'm seeing that it has to be this way or it's not the right way? And how can I see it as just a different interpretation? How can I poke holes in it and still have my belief system intact, but at the same time see that other people, oh yeah, I can totally see why you see it this way. That makes sense to me, why you might see it that way. I understand. Thank you for explaining to me that that's how you perceive it. And when I started doing that and kind of poking holes in my own thoughts, it helped me to be more present with myself and looking at it from, because sometimes what I think we do, like for me, what I would find myself doing is I'm like, but I just want to show them that this is a better way. Like, this is just a better way to be. And it goes back to that old saying, right? You can, drag a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. What good is it when we say, but this is the better way? Well, I know a better way for you to do this. This is how you should be doing this. If we do it this way, it makes more sense. As opposed to maybe opening up to it and going like, well, this is how I kind of see it happening. This is what to me resonates. What resonates to you? Because maybe you have a different way to see it and I do. And together we can actually find something even better. And that's one thing I love the most about being in that kind of emotion of curiosity and deciding to have thoughts that were curious as opposed to constrictive. When I start to do that, I start to want to see patterns and seeing how we can connect more in the sense that, oh, I can see why you see it this way and I see it this way. Maybe if we did this, would that make sense to you? Maybe it doesn't make sense. Well, maybe this. And we start to kind of have that dialogue. And then the dialogue, what that does is it creates more connection in that relationship because you're listening to them. You're hearing them out. You're not trying to convince them to see something your way. And when we do try to convince, what I find, which is interesting for me, is that I can really admire people that are very strong in their convictions and that they see things the way, but I actually admire people more when they are very strong in their convictions and they're open to seeing other people's way of seeing it. And if you think about history, because I love looking at history and like these patterns we've had in history. And what's interesting is that when you look at history, you can see one person seeing history one way and another person seeing it the other way, but it's still history. Like there's still certain facts in there, there's certain stuff, but then they can interpret it their own way. And it makes me realize that there isn't any such thing as bad history. It's just history. And we get to choose how we perceive it. We can see it as being wrong or negative, I guess you could say. We can see it as being positive and helpful. We can choose the way that we perceive it. But the past, right, is written. And we don't necessarily know the trials and things that people went through. But we can get curious about it for our present being right now and see it in connection to our life right now. And that's when history becomes very powerful. It doesn't have much power when it's just sitting in a book and it's just, the idea, the concept of what was shared or what happened or the opinions or the perspective somebody has about the past. Now, those are all good things. Nothing's wrong with them, but it's when we kind of can align them to stuff in our lives and we can start to see similarities in the way that we show up in our lives and ways that might be more beneficial than the way I'm doing it now. Like maybe there's a different way to do this. Well, they did it that way before. What's different here? There's always going to be a lot of, naysayers, a lot of people that don't want to get curious, that want to see things their way. And that's okay too. Recently I went on a family vacation and we had disagreements on some things, on what we were going to do and what we should do and stuff like that. And what I kind of found is that when I was present with it and just got curious about maybe where they're coming from, maybe something that's going on, maybe they're having a frustrating time too, they just wanted to have a good time as well and they're not having it. When I got curious about that, as opposed to trying to define my position and say that the way that I'm going to do it, that this is the right way to do it, it actually helped me become more present in that space. And then I felt more connected with the people in my life. And when you can allow yourself to do that and just get curious about your thinking, just things start to open up so much. And like I said, one of the big things to do is kind of poking holes at it, like poke holes at your curiosity and poke holes at your beliefs. Poking holes at your beliefs does not mean that they're going to go away. It just means you can see that there's some different options there that you might not have seen before. And it gives you that courage to maybe search things outside of you that you normally wouldn't have searched for. And you know what's interesting is like, I love to read books on different points of views than what I have. And when I do that, what I find is that there are things within the book. There's things that I don't agree with in the book, but there are things within the book that I'm like, wow, that's exactly how I see it. And it's fascinating because, right, going into it, I thought, well, this person sees it this way and that's not how I see it, or, because that's kind of more that closed mind idea. But when I can go, wow, I wonder what I can learn from them and how they perceive the world. And some things, like I said, I would agree with, and other things I'm like, yeah, I don't agree with that. That doesn't make sense to me. To me, that seems like sometimes people will say things, and to me, I'm like, well, that's kind of the opposite of that, isn't it? But then in their mind, that's where I get curious. But in their mind, they're seeing it the same way I'm seeing it, but oppositely. Isn't that fascinating? Like, I can be like, no, this is a good idea this way. And you're telling me that that's the problem when I believe that's the good idea. And then somebody else will say something. I'm like, wow, it's so fascinating. They think that's the good idea. They're seeing it from their lens, their angle. And yet at the same time, I'm like, that doesn't quite fit. But I can understand why they might be seeing it that way now because I've opened up to it. I'm like, oh, okay, I can see but this is how I see it, but I can see this. Do you see what I'm saying? So when we start to get curious, when we start to just decide to get curious about something, and instead of going in with, all guns a-blazing and believing like we're going to, put our feet into the ground and you can't make us move, when we go into it and we be like, oh, that's different. And, one of the things that I get questions asked a lot from clients is like, well, but this is something I really strongly believe in. And I'm like, absolutely, you should strongly believe in something. And it's through the way that we decide to create something bigger and better from our beliefs, as opposed to proving that our belief is right. And that's kind of when I go into that proving energy versus that creation energy, which I truly believe is kind of that when we start to observe that and see that in our lives, we start to get more curious because we see that the proving energy, how forceful it is, how it feels, it doesn't feel right. Like when people start to say things and they start to downplay somebody else, it just doesn't feel right, even if it's not your point of view, even if it's not the way that you view it, or maybe it's the way you do view it. The way that they address it, it's very pull downish. And when we start to get creative and we start to kind of develop and decide to create something bigger, that's when you start to really stand for a cause. And when you start to stand for something big, because you're creating the solution, you're not stating the problem. When we start to create solutions and we start to come from that energy, it's very different than when we're stating the problem and what the faults are. We want to, when you decide to, like for me, that's where I want to be. I don't want to be in that you're right, I'm wrong mentality. I want to see this is how I see it, and I believe this with all my heart, and now I create this. Not this is how I see it, now you should agree with me. If you don't agree with me, then something's wrong with you. Because that's going to get me into that battle. And what happens is it keeps you stuck. Prove energy does nothing but keep you stuck because you're just in this constant battle. As creation energy says, oh, I see your point of view. I see mine. I know what I stand for. And now I'm seeing it and I'm creating something that I can show people things that will help them, that will encourage them, that they can embrace, that resonates to them, that speaks to their heart, their spirit, that gives them hope. Because when we start to make that shift, it all comes from truly deciding to get curious, getting curious about your own beliefs, curious about your own thoughts. So my friends, as you start to see all different angles of things and decide to get curious, your world will truly begin to open up bigger than you even thought was possible. And part of the things I've seen that was I've gotten curious is that I've had to let go of some things in order to sit in the place of abundance, in order to sit in the place of creativity, and to grow bigger as an individual from just being who I am and not by what I'm doing. And that world is amazing. If you want to know more about that, please make sure to reach out to me and let's get you scheduled for a discovery call. Because if you're feeling like you're having discouragement and you're not opening up as much as you would like to when it comes to other people's thoughts and opinions, and you want to see how you can yet stand on your own firmness, but yet allow other people to believe differently, I'd love to be able to talk and connect with you and help you out as you process all these different emotions that'll come up for you during that time. All right, my friends, take care. I look forward to seeing you yet another time for another video for next week. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.